Increased focus on selective sourcing and increasing dissatisfaction with the mega deals is another trend. So the reason you folks are in the room today is because you are sourcing experts or vendor management experts. And that means that you have the expertise to hire lots of best-in-breed providers and integrate them across your enterprise, as opposed to having to rely on a mega provider and a mega deal to provide you with all the services that you require. And really what folks have found over the years is that selective sourcing deals are much more effective and much more successful. Now this is actually old data, but I love it, and it was done by a couple of researchers. And they took a look at a bunch of outsourcing projects to figure out why they were failing. And you can see the reasons are on the bottom of your screen, but the key takeaway here is that in single sourcing deals, folks declare themselves successful only 38% of the time, whereas in selective outsourcing deals, they've declared success 77% of the time. And this really, I think, is a stark reminder that we need to be really good vendor management and sourcing experts in order to be able to make these relationships work. And, you know, kind of to underscore, to prove this point, Forrester did a survey. We asked more than 1,000 people whether they were in a selective sourcing or a full outsourcing relationship. And as you can see, 84% were in fact in selective outsourcing relationships. What's really, really interesting about this data, though, is that we asked data and infrastructure people who are much more inclined to a single source provider as opposed to apps folks who often have multiple providers. So even on the infrastructure side, we're seeing this breaking up of the infrastructure and out-tasking as opposed to full outsourcing deals. Okay, now the next major trend, and it's one that I deal with every day, and certainly Bob and Dana are going to talk about this in a minute, but there is this insatiable desire to optimize costs. So I know on this screen I have optimized processes to reduce costs, and to reduce costs. But the reason people want to optimize their processes is because they now recognize that that is a big cost takeout. That's a huge win in order to reduce costs, and I'll show you some data related to that. But clients today, as we've discussed, people like you are much more sophisticated. Sourcing executives know it all. They know more than I do. You study the market. You talk to your peers in forums like the Sourcing FLB, Forrester Leadership Board, that we held here yesterday. And clients are now experts at managing service contracts as opposed to just programmers. In the old days, we saw the IT manager being put in the position of having to manage a vendor, a task for which he or she didn't have the skills or the training. Now we're beyond that. Now we understand you need specialists, vendor people, vendor management people to manage these relationships. And these smart people are realizing that cheap labor is the least of the value proposition. That's nothing, okay? And in addition to that, they're saying, wow, my outsourcing costs all of a sudden are increasing, especially the early adopters who have been outsourcing for a long time, the banks. You know, they're saying, I saw the cost takeout, I saw this optimization over a 4 or 5 year period, and all of a sudden, with the costs going up in India, my costs are beginning to rise slightly again, and that doesn't look good. Where am I going to get the next lever? How am I going to show value? And what these savvy folks are saying is, let's look at where the real value is coming from. And as you can see, this particular graphic came from McKinsey and a client of Forrester's. And they did an evaluation to see where their savings was coming from, what their savings was and where it was coming from. And as you can see here, 31% of the savings came from process optimization and standardization. Labor arbitrage was good for 9%, okay? That is where your value is, and that is what you as sourcing executives need to get to. You need to make sure that as you prepare to outsource and as you engage with vendors, process optimization and standardization is the big focus. I think, you know, that is not to say that folks are not still focused on rates. People are very focused, as you can see from this graphic, on renegotiating rates with incumbents. But the point, I think, that you'll find is that rates are only going up. And the only way now to find, as I said, these levers is to focus on a more holistic strategic partnership with your vendors in order to find more value, bring your costs down more. Okay, the need to transform. So innovation, to innovate, is a word that is so overused, especially in my business, and especially in my industry. Everyone's offering innovation. Everyone's talking about innovation. What the heck is innovation? Well, I'll tell you what. I was actually at a conference last week, and I listened to this fantastic gentleman named Don Tapscott talk about social networking and innovation, and it really was an inspiring talk. But he talked about the need in certain industries that companies have to innovate. So in industries like media and television, if you don't innovate, it doesn't matter how much money you save. Because, for example, people like you and me, we watch about 24 hours of TV per week. Sounds a little high to me, but I guess we do. Our children do not and will not. They take that 24 hours of leisure time and they use it on the computer, interacting with the computer. So companies, media companies like MTV, are all of a sudden saying, uh-oh, how do I get onto the computer? What cool technologies can I use to entice people back to the TV or back to my website or what have you? And the issue is that some of these sort of innovations may not be available to them internally. And you wonder, where today? Given the technological drivers behind most of the innovations we're facing, where is this technology and business innovation going to come from? In the old days, we said you can't outsource because you lose innovation, as though you can only innovate internally on your own. But today, my question is, can you get the right innovation internally? Let's think about your senior business execs, many of whom, don't even know how to use their email. Can they envision sort of the technical innovation required to move their business forward? Probably not. What about the IT folks? Do they have a lot of free time, or are they really busy keeping the lights on every day? And even if they had the free time, is that free time going to be spent doing research on bleeding edge technology? Probably not. So where is the innovation going to come from? And what we've seen is that people are beginning to more and more rely on the service provider community for that very high value support. Now, can you buy innovation from your IT service providers? Well, today it's definitely a mixed bag. Some providers are capable, some providers are not. But a few things are clear. First of all, the provider has to have really deep vertical business process and technology expertise. They have to understand the business as well as the executive from MTV understands the business. And they have to understand the technology. And, by the way, they have to have bleeding edge technology skills and groups doing research, doing advanced technology experiments, if you will. So that's another thing companies have to look at. How much is your service provider investing in R&D? To what extent can they actually help you with innovation? And finally, clients have to request innovation. If that's what you need, you really have to make sure you specify that, because it doesn't come as part of the deal. Just as a lot of other things you may require don't come as part of the deal unless you specify them. Okay, and in terms of how Forrester views the shifting global value equation, and this is a graphic that my colleague John McCarthy developed. But as you can see today, we rely very little on our service providers, on our global service providers for innovation. But we believe that by 2015, the major part of the value, or at least half the value we get from these global service providers, is going to be through value-added IP and innovation activities. And so you, again, will have to prepare sort of for that value.